Hi, I'm Nathaniel.
And I'm Hannah.
And I'm Eliana, and we're doing a project on the effects of caffeine consumption on the brain.
To start off with, though, we polled some Whitworth students just to gain an idea of what the average caffeine consumption is on campus. So, let's check it out. First, if you could give us your names.
Hi, I'm John.
I'm JD.
And we're wondering how much caffeine you have in a week. So, like, how many coffees, that kind of thing.
Too much, probably, to be healthy. It's a good, 3-4 cups of coffee a day. Lord knows I need to stop drinking coffee, but it is a lot. I survive solely on caffeine, basically.
Oh my god.
Maybe like a bottle of soda a day. So roughly maybe a bottle of soda a day.
Okay.
No coffee.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, if you could say your name, and then we're just asking how much caffeine you have in a week. So that include like how many sodas, how many coffees, that kind of thing. So general estimate.
Hello, I'm Tommy Okamoto. I drink about 2 cups of tea, green tea, about every day throughout the day. It kind of just depends when I'm tired and I'll just drink it. And I also sometimes have like a cup of Get My Shot randomly, sporadically, so I'd say 3 times a week maybe. That's about it. Don't drink coffee or anything else.
Sweet. Well, thank you.
Quinn Tomasino. How much caffeine do I consume? I would say a reasonable amount. I do drink a lot of soda. I don't drink coffee very often. However, there are times where, like special occasions, where I'm studying and maybe a little more focus is necessary, and then I use caffeine to help with that. So I do drink some coffee sometimes. Usually it's just like the pre-made Starbucks coffee that's found in the cafe.
Hi, I'm Sarah Cool. I don't drink any caffeine, so I've had 0 this week.
Cool.
Hello. What's the question?
How much caffeine do you drink in a week?
I try to not drink caffeine unless I can't function that day. So I'd say maybe like a cup a week. It's been less recently, but I'm also getting more tired, so the levels will increase.
I'm Emily Cahill, and I drink 1 cup of coffee, sometimes 2, each day, and probably 1 cup of tea or 2 a week, but it's normally caffeine-free tea.
Cool.
Thank you.
So my name?
Yep.
My name's Nate, and what did I say, 7 or 5 cups? 5 cups of coffee a week.
Okay. What about you? I'm Callista, and I have 14 cups of coffee. It's so bad, I know. Do you have any soda or anything on top of that? Sometimes, not usually. Okay.
Hi, I'm Heather Fortway, and I don't drink any coffee. I've had probably 1 cup in my entire life. So, yeah, I do drink tea though. Sometimes caffeinated and sometimes caffeine-free, probably once or twice a week.
Sweet. For our first game, we're doing a relay race, and the people in it are going to be representing neurotransmitters, and they have a certain colored ball, which is represented by a certain colored plank, I guess. And they represent the neurotransmitters, and the plank represents the receptors, and they have to take the ball and throw it at the corresponding receptor that corresponds with the color.
Here we have that there are potassium ions and sodium ions present inside and outside of the cell. The balance of these ions inside and outside of the cell is maintained by the sodium-potassium pump along the cell membrane. For every 3 sodium channels that exit the cell via this pump, 2 potassium ions come inside the cell. So this makes the inside of the cell slightly more negative than outside of the cell. When a stimulus reaches the cell, sodium will decide to go down its electrical and chemical and concentration gradient to be inside the cell, which will make the inside of the cell more positive until it depolarizes to the threshold, which is about negative 55 millivolts. When this happens, an action potential is stimulated and oh gosh, it'll travel from the cell body and down the axon of the neuron. When it reaches the axon terminal, the action potential will stimulate neurotransmitter to be released from the presynaptic terminal into the synapse, where it'll then go to specific receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. The synapse is just a space in between the neurons where communication between neurons can occur, and a form of this communication is the chemicals known as neurotransmitters. So in our game, this was shown by how the competitors each had a ball that was a different color. So there were 2 different neurotransmitters. And then they had to run down and throw their neurotransmitter at a plank of the same color of their ball. That plank represented the receptor. So this just showed how the neurotransmitter had to go to a specific receptor for them to win the game or to communicate their message. Some specific neurotransmitters that we'll be focusing on in this game show video are acetylcholine, which is implicated in muscular movement, attention, and motivation. Serotonin, which is implicated in depression, mood, eating and appetite, sleeping and waking, pain, and sexual behavior. And dopamine, which is involved in the reward pathway. Dopamine is also implicated in drug abuse and motor control. And finally, we have adrenaline, which is produced following strong emotions, and this is implicated in our fight or flight response.
We had 2 players participate in a game called the Stroop Task, where both players attempted to quickly identify the different colors of words. The goal was to see who gets the fastest color identifications. The task was difficult because the colors did not align with the words. For example, they would see the word red, but the word would be in yellow. For example, the correct answer for that would be yellow.
Here are the results. Audrey's the winner. Oh, wow.
We use the Stroop task to measure processing speed by timing the lag between color processing and word processing. The Stroop task also measures selective attention because it takes more attention for the brain to process the color of the word instead of just the word itself. We tested the processing speeds of 2 participants who had not ingested caffeine prior. In this case, player 1 won, indicating a faster processing time. Caffeine has a reputation of making people more attentive or awake while performing tasks. Thus, the Stroop task was used in a caffeine study to put the reputation to the test by testing the effects of caffeine on Stroop results, and thereby testing caffeine's effect on processing speed and selective attention. Researchers used the Stroop task to study the effects of caffeine on attention processes. 30 male college students performed the Stroop task before and 40 minutes after consuming 3 milligrams of caffeine per 3 kilograms of body weight. The results from before and after caffeine consumption were then compared to determine the overall results. They found that caffeine promotes faster processing of relevant information along neuronal pathways, but too much caffeine is not helpful. They also found that caffeine has a harmful effect on tasks that involve conflicting stimuli. Caffeine is the most widely consumed CNS stimulant, making it important to inform the public about its effects. Its main function is to increase energy metabolism in the brain, but there is a cost to this, as it decreases cerebral blood flow. Caffeine is also affects noradrenaline neurons and has some effect on the release of dopamine. Another effect of caffeine is that it has an impact on anxiety and sleep, thanks in part to the individual's reaction to methylxanthine, which gives caffeine its psychoactive properties. That's it.
Hello! Our third and final game is a trivia challenge between Anya versus Caleb. How this game will work is I will ask them a question, and then each contestant will write their answer in the note card and smack the table. The first contestant to smack the table gets the first chance to answer. If they get it wrong, it goes to the next contestant. So, let's get started. Question 1. True or false? Caffeine, like cocaine, works by blocking dopamine transporters in the brain. Anya?
False.
Nope, this is true. Question number 2. True or false? You can get addicted to caffeine.
True.
It was Caleb.
What? He just smacked louder.
No, you smack first. You need to smack before you hold up your card.
Would this answer be true?
It would be true, Caleb, and you know why? Because caffeine stimulates the reward pathway, much like cocaine does, in that it blocks the dopamine transporters in the synaptic junction, and so the dopamine can't be reabsorbed back into the presynaptic cell.
Do you need a new card?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, question number 3. What is the highest recommended dose of caffeine per day in milligrams? Anya?
50.
Incorrect. Caleb?
10.
Incorrect. It is 400 milligrams.
Wow, that's a lot.
I think it's about 2 coffees. That might be wrong.
It's the recommended daily or like
The recommended maximum daily.
maximum? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So far, Caleb has 1 point and Anya has 0.
I'm not even gonna try.
Okay. Question number 4. Which of the following is not a possible long-term symptom of overconsumption of caffeine? A. Increased heart rate. B. Migraines. C. Sleep disruption. Or D. Raised blood pressure. I'll read the options again. Anya.
B.
That is incorrect. Caleb?
That's what I said too.
The only negative consequence that was not associated with long-term overconsumption of caffeine is increased blood pressure.
Wait, say that again.
increased blood pressure. It's not an effective too much caffeine.
Yeah, that actually would make sense.
Yeah. If you regularly drink more than the 400 milligrams, you will probably, the risk of side effects are sleep disruption, migraines and other headaches, quickened heartbeat, muscle tremors, irritability, nervousness, and an upset stomach.
Yep. Yeah, not a lot affects blood pressure.
Okay. So number 5. So there's a pattern of caffeine dependence that experts talk about. Is the pattern A, tolerance, dependence, and then withdrawal, B, dependence, tolerance, withdrawal, or C, withdrawal, tolerance, dependence? Caleb?
A?
Correct! So quick point update. Caleb has 2 points and Anya has 0. And the correct order of the caffeine addiction is...
Out of here.
What?
Do we need to break you guys up? It was option A.
I didn't think that would
Okay. Okay, 2 more questions. Anya, you have enough time. You can do this. You can tie. 6. Which of the following does not contain caffeine? A, chocolate, B, coffee, C, Monster Energy drinks, or D, none of the above? Anya.
D.
Correct! Anya's on the board! Okay, final question.
What did you put?
F.
What?
Nothing.
Okay. Question 7. True or false? Caffeine is just as addictive as cocaine. Anya.
I put false. I don't know if that's
Correct! Even though caffeine works in the reward pathway in a similar way that cocaine does, it does not create like a high or an intoxication in the same way that cocaine does. So it acts, and in terms of addiction, it acts differently. However, I don't really have a bonus question. Congrats, you tied! Right, rock, paper, scissors.
Fillmore.
No!
Rock, paper,
Arm
scissors.
wrestling competition.
Arm, paper, scissors. Arm, paper, scissors. Yep.
On shoot.
I'm sure.
On shoot.
One time.
Caleb's the winner! Congratulations! Thank you for playing.
While experts may not say that dependency on caffeine is an addiction, there are still obvious patterns of tolerance, dependence, and withdrawal, much like in addictions to other drugs like nicotine or cocaine. This is because caffeine stimulates the reward pathway in the same way that cocaine does. The reward pathway is comprised of the nucleus accumbens in the basal ganglia, the ventral tegmental area, the locus ceruleus, and the prefrontal cortex. Drug use and caffeine consumption seem to mostly stimulate the areas of the brain that are a part of the reward pathway. Dopamine, or the feel-good hormone, is also implicated in this pathway. After dopamine has been released into the synapse via the presynaptic neuron, both caffeine and cocaine are able to block dopamine transporters from allowing any excess dopamine to be reabsorbed back into the presynaptic neuron. And this is what causes the high from the drugs. Eventually, our bodies will try to readjust the dopamine balance in order to maintain homeostasis by lowering the amount of dopamine being released. This leads to the individual acquiring more of the drug to achieve the same high. According to the Mayo Clinic, over time, the overconsumption of caffeine may cause sleep disruption, migraines and other headaches, a quickened heartbeat, muscle tremors, irritability, nervousness, and an upset stomach. A lot of the time, people don't think of caffeine as a drug, but it can still be a dangerous drug to get addicted to.
Hello. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Caffeine Goes to College. We so appreciate you taking the time to learn about caffeine's effect on your brain. We thought that before you go, we'd love to do a recap on everything that we've learned so far. So at the beginning of the show, we interviewed a bunch of Whitworth students to find out their caffeine consumption on a weekly basis. And we found out that every single person that we interviewed consumes caffeine on a weekly basis. Some even admitted to consuming way too much caffeine. This is why it's so important to know how caffeine affects us, because if we're all consuming it, then we should all be aware of its effects. Then we went into the game where, if you remember, there were 2 contestants and they had to run and shoot the ball at a plank of the same color as their ball. This helps demonstrate how neurotransmitters work on a very basic level. After an action potential has gone down the axon, it triggers a neurotransmitter to be released from the presynaptic cell into the synaptic junction. This is where communication occurs between 2 neuronal cells. After it's been released into the synapse, the neurotransmitter then binds to a specific receptor on the postsynaptic cell. This is represented by the game because if you remember, the contestants could only shoot the ball at the plank that was the same color of the ball that they had. We also mentioned some of the most important hormones that are affiliated with caffeine: dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, and adrenaline. Then we went into a Stroop task competition between 2 people to see who could get the best score on a Stroop test. A Stroop test, if you remember, is when they were shown a name of a color that was written out, but sometimes the color of the word was different than the color that was written within the word, and the participants had to be able to distinguish whether the word and the color matched or whether it didn't as quickly as possible. So therefore, a lower score indicated both success in the distinguishing, but also in the speed and reaction time. We also discussed a study that also used a Stroop evaluation that was done by Vaney, Dixit, Goyal, and Thawani, where 30 undergraduate students performed the test before and after consuming caffeine in order to evaluate the effects of caffeine on Stroop interference and facilitation. The results revealed that there was a reduction in Stroop interference and an increase in facilitation after consumption of caffeine, as was evident by changes in reaction time in response to stimuli. The researchers concluded that caffeine led to faster processing of relevant information. And then we moved on to our final game, which was a trivia challenge where 2 college students put their knowledge of caffeine to the test. After the game, we learned that caffeine is addictive and affects the brain in similar ways to other drugs like nicotine or cocaine because of how it blocks the dopamine transporters in the brain. Overall, caffeine isn't all that bad. However, we do need to be aware of how much caffeine we are consuming in order to avoid potentially negative effects. Everything in moderation, folks. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
So is that a -1?
Also.
No, not no points. Okay.
Shoot their chemical into the right reception. Frick!
That's about it. Don't drink coffee or anything else.
Sweet. Well, thank you. Enjoy your day. Dan,
Cool.
thank you. Would you like to answer us?
In the cafe.
Stop!